Hi, this is Jonathan Armstrong from Caudry, the compliance law firm. I'm pleased to say Eric Sinrod is joining me from California for another of our TechLaw10 podcast/films. We're doing a bit of a potpourri of three different topics today. And Eric, there's a long and winding road that leads to your first one. Maybe I've given a hint. What's that?
Oh my gosh, that was so well done, Jonathan. Greetings, Eric Sinrod from Duane Morris. Yes, Sir Paul McCartney from your side of the pond. We've just learned is going to be using AI to extricate John Lennon's voice from an old demo, a very rough, scratchy demo, to create a finished song. So that sounds well and good, but it makes me think about using, voices of people who were deceased, their prior, images to essentially create new content. I don't think that's what's happening here. I think this is just sort of polishing it up. But, we're now in a world where we can be bringing back people from the past and putting them in context that they weren't actually in, and they're saying things they didn't actually say. They're having movements they didn't actually perform. And something about that rubs me the wrong way, but I'm curious your thoughts, Jonathan.
Yeah, I heard an interview yesterday over in the UK with a person who's like a sound engineering type person who said, well, actually, the tool they're using isn't AI at all. It's a tool that effectively filters out background noise and makes, one particular audio range, if you like, prominent, saying that they'd been doing it almost forever. I know certainly at law school, we had to study, for one case, parabolic microphone technology, which obviously does the same thing, where it filters out back and it allows you to focus, just as you would focus a telescope visually. The technology, I think, has existed for a while to focus noise. And I seem to remember the story about Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield and them using technology like that. So whether it's new or not, I don't know. That maybe illustrates another point, though, that to the over 70s, almost anything that is newfangled technology is AI. And I respectfully put Sir Paul in that bracket. And also to people who are trying to sell the shizzle out of semi-old stuff, dressing it up with an AI label is sometimes the done thing as well. But taking it at its face value, I think AI undoubtedly causes challenges. We've had just yesterday an announcement that the Irish Data Protection Commission is suspending the importation of Bard AI into the EU. Ireland's the lead regulator for the EU in data privacy terms. That obviously follows on the issues that ChatGPT has had in Italy, investigations into ChatGPT in other countries, and the banning of replica AI in Italy that we've talked about on these podcasts before. And I guess that whole topic around training the dragon, if you like, is important here, isn't it? Yeah. What is the input data that we're using? Have you got the rights to use that input data? Obviously, in GDPR terms, relatively straightforward. If the owner of the data is no longer with us, because GDPR in the main only applies to living individuals, but as you rightly say, all sorts of other copyright implications, etc. as well. And I'm conscious that I've spoken for about double the time on your topic, so apologies.
All right, well, we could go to the next topic, although just finishing that one up in terms of being mindful of training the dragon, is that how you called it? I read that there was a meeting of CEOs, and don't quote me precisely on this, but about almost half predicted that AI could end humanity in the next 5 to 10 years. So, okay, maybe that beast needs to be trained. Shall I go to the second topic?
Yes, let's.
Yeah, so YouTube recently announced that it will no longer remove content featuring false claims that the 2020 US presidential election was stolen And this reverses a policy that was put in place more than 2 years ago when there was a wave of misinformation about the election. And YouTube apparently in a blog post said it will stop removing, quote, content that advances false claims that widespread fraud, errors, or glitches occurred in the 2020 and other past US presidential elections, close quote. And it gets my mind going again on this topic about, okay, now we have multiple indictments against the most recent former president. And this already is creating a wave of misinformation on all sorts of issues, political, as we are heading into a new presidential election cycle. And I just wonder about how much guardrails should be put in place, on outlets like YouTube and other social media sites when there is the great potential for misinformation that can misinform people, which can influence election results potentially. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's a huge challenge to monitor content on places like YouTube and particularly film media, because the technology isn't great at viewing that content. But also, I think we do need to be really cautious. Just as you have those debates there, we have those debates here. Just this morning, the Parliamentary Privileges Committee announced a draft censure of our former Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the lies that he told not only to the British public but also to the UK Parliament. And I think we need to be on our guard about people rewriting the truth. And there's certainly efforts to do that, I think, on both sides of the pond.
Yeah, you're referring to Partygate, right?
I have indeed.
Okay, so third topic, Jonathan, you're thinking something having to do with France, influencers. What's in your mind?
I am, yeah. And interesting that you should start it with prediction, because regulatory activities stepped up in France. My favorite case of the month yesterday was a GDPR case against an online clairvoyant who obviously didn't see the investigation coming. I'll get my symbols. But there's a new my new favorite word, I think, of the month is influvoleur. So what is an influvoleur? Well, it's a French term, effectively combining voleur, so thief, with influencer. So you might call them influencers, we call them influencers, because they grow, I think, like the flu, don't they, all over social media. And the French Parliament has effectively had enough, and they've passed a new law dealing with the influvoleur, and it's got cross-party consensus. So talking of those days of, divisive politics, this is an initiative which I understand has got consensus right across the board in France. And so the new law will be targeted at social media influencers, and a number have already been ordered by existing law to display messages on their social media to qualify the claims that they're making. And this proposed new law is interesting in a number of respects. It's trying to prohibit influencers getting involved in certain areas. So promoting some medical procedures, promoting sports betting, sports forecasting, gaming, nicotine, things like that, with potentially quite meaty penalties. So prison terms in some cases, or fines of 300,000 euros. And whilst that might not sound that much to large corporations, of course, often these influencers are, well remunerated, but tend to be people at the start of their career. So maybe fines like that are a deterrent. It'll also propose different disclosure type rules. So if you and I were to appear, for example, promoting the plumpness of our lips, which might be next month's podcast, and we'd had some filler applied, then we'd have to say, Eric, your lips look plump today, and then you'd have to reply, yes, Jonathan, I've had a surgical procedure done to my lips, or we'd have to have an on-screen warning or something. And they're also trying to look at the extraterritorial effect of the influvoleur, just as under GDPR, where they tried to have extraterritoriality. Well, there's some similar sort of provisions here. The French Parliament, as many of us are concerned, particularly about countries like Dubai, which seem to be attracting the influvoleur, who thinks that they can get outside of the laws or advertising regulations that exist here by being in Dubai. And of course, a number of Middle Eastern, UAE destinations have been attracting that community as part of their marketing campaign. Indeed, in the UK, we've had some activity recently by the Advertising Standards Authority against Rio Ferdinand, a well-known football player. You'd call him a soccer player wrongly. And his connections with Qatar, where the ASA decided that he hadn't fully disclosed the fact that he was effectively being paid to mention Qatar on social media, even though it said #ad on some of his posts. We've also had recent ASA activity in the UK against Carl Woods over his cosmetic procedures and George Baggs over his use of vaping. I'll confess, I don't know who the latter two are. Probably my daughters would, but again, I think evidence of the activity of the influvoleur. And of course, some of these things can be even more serious. The BBC have ran some investigations into influvoleur who are doing, good old-fashioned Ponzi schemes. For example, there's one based in the US, and one of my daughter's friends was nearly targeted by this individual, where she befriends people on Instagram, comments on their photographs. She has a large number of Instagram followers herself. Fast forward, she then invites the individuals who she's groomed, for want of a better word, to attend one-on-one workshops with her, where she will show how to get the number of followers she has to people whose Instagram accounts she's targeted. And then, of course, the whole thing turns out to be a scam. And in some cases, people have traveled long distances for a slap-up lunch and a workshop and have ended up with a disappointed sandwich from Walgreens. So definitely, I think the whole influencer thing is on the rise, and it'll be interesting to see whether France manages to sort of clean up the activity, or whether this is just another law that's a well thought out or well-intentioned measure that doesn't have any teeth.
Yeah, very interesting. And I like the expression, or the word influenzas. Very good. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, it's one thing to have a law in place, but then, what are the enforcement resources you get to the problem? And one thinks that perhaps maybe France would go after some notable, influenza examples, and have some stiff penalties, maybe even prison time there. And that could act as a deterrent to other influenzas down the chain, if you will, because it might be difficult to go after, so many of them in France. And then also, you were talking about, international issues. I mean, internet content goes worldwide. So you're going to have influencers from the United States, from the UK, et cetera, being viewable in France. So, what's the extraterritorial reach of this law to deal with influencers in countries? And so even if they curtail influencers doing what they don't like, who are based in France, does it go? Can the net be cast wider?
Yeah, and I think the approach of the UK has really been to go almost after the products that the influencers are promoting. So if it's a soap company and they're saying this soap washes better than any other, they're targeting the owner of the soap company to say, hang on, there are disclosure requirements. So they're effectively leaning on the product that's being promoted in the main rather than the person who's promoting it online. And maybe that's a wider warning to people watching or listening to this podcast, that you have to be really careful, I think, in your contracts with individuals, particularly since so many of our marketing teams are reaching out to what you might call non-mainstream media, arranging product launches where I hear some people have got 80% influencers versus 20% mainstream media. You just need to think through those risks more, because you've got less control when you're putting it into the hands of effectively a one-man band versus a existing media publication that's got its own compliance teams, etc.
Well, a fascinating topic, and I hope our hodgepodge, or a potpourri, as you call it, but we call it potpourri, will be interesting to our viewers. And of course, we welcome your comments. And I just want to say two last things. First, I want to thank your assistant, Joe, publicly, because she's incredible and she really organizes and helps make this happen for us. Also, Ted, who puts the films together for us and finalizes them. Well done always. And it's important to thank the people who help us.
Yeah, here. I think they've both done a great job and have helped us out enormously. So thanks to them.
Yeah.
Contact details.
All right. Well, my name, if you didn't know it, is Eric Sinrod. I'm at the international law firm Duane Morris. I'm based in San Francisco. My email is ejsinrod@duanemorris.com. I don't know the precise number, but we're almost at 300 of these podcasts now, video podcasts, Jonathan, and let's keep it going.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Jonathan.Armstrong@CaudryCompliance.com. I feel like we didn't get enough Beatle puns in, and we apologize for them. You have a ticket to ride to join us next time when we'll try and discuss some more. I wasn't able to shoehorn obscure Beatles songs in like a Norwegian would, but we're nonetheless very grateful that you've joined us, and we'll speak to you again in a month or so.
Yeah, and if he comments on my lips, they're all natural. I'm not promoting any filler. All right, cheers.
Take care all. Bye now. Bye.